We are tuned in to fitness and consciousness. Today's episode is called The Big Scary Monster. So what is the big scary monster in your life? Is it, maybe it's your husband? Maybe it's your wife? Maybe she's a 5'3", 110-pound big scary monster. What other kind of big scary monsters do we have? Maybe the big scary monster is yourself when you're alone. Like, what do you think about? Where does your mind go? Maybe that big scary monster is a sink full of dishes. I just got home from the gym a little bit ago. It's about, whatever time it is, 9:30, almost 10 o'clock at night, Sunday night. And I get home and I look at it's like dishes in the sink. And it's like, nobody did the dishes. Like, I live by myself, but so it's like I'm that nobody that did the dishes, or I'm the nobody that didn't do the dishes. So I'll do them later. Whatever. But that's not so much of a big scary monster, is it? Maybe the big scary monster is your boss at work. And maybe what other kind of big scary monsters are there? So there was this, I gotta be kind of careful how I explain. There was this woman that I met not too long ago. I don't want to give the context or anything, but found out like we have a lot of interesting things in common. And so there was a couple. I got to be careful what I say. I want to explain it without giving away who it is or anything. But let's just say we figured out we had a few things in common that I don't think either of us knew before well, of course we didn't know before we met. But then it's like, okay, is there, dating potential here? And that wasn't the reason why we met. But so I guess I like tossed out a little clue that I was interested in at least seeing what happened without even saying that much. Very smooth. It's a big scary monster. And she kind of did the same thing, but then I wasn't sure how to interpret it. Maybe just because I wasn't clear, she wasn't clear, nobody's clear. Sometimes that big scary monster is just as simple as throwing it out there. Hey, I'm interested in getting to know you more. And you see what happens. And whatever happens, it's the truth, right? So you ask her out, she says no, she's involved with someone else or whatever, then that's the truth. You might as well be okay with it. And if things go your way and she says yes, then great, it was worth it. The big scary monster was tamed. Then if she says yes, then there's the big scary monster of presenting yourself as something that she would want. And hopefully that's the truth. Hopefully your inner darkness, because everybody has that. Everybody has something Everybody has a dark side, right? Hopefully that doesn't come out and ruin things for you. But anyways, there was another big scary monster that went after today, and that was updating my website. And I had a friend of mine. She made my website. She did a really good job on it. I was really happy with it, and it needed updated because I'm at my new gym, and there's some updates on it that needed to be done. And I didn't want to keep asking her to do it. She's super busy. She did it all as just a favor to me. She was coming to my classes and stuff, so there was a little bit of a trade going on. And so I thought this was like through WordPress, and that I thought that maybe you had to know coding, and I thought you had to know stuff that I didn't know. So I built a website before, and even though it was like supposed to be a simple drag and drop kind of thing, it was still a real pain for me. And it took me a long time to figure stuff out. And I had a buddy of mine, Chris Atkins, just kind of offered to help me out with it. Like, sure. So I called SiteGround, that's the hosting service, and I kind of asked them, like, can you send me the steps to figure this out? And so they sent me some stuff, and it turns out it's really not so difficult. So we did it, and now I'm comfortable with going into it myself. And that big scary monster of building the website, that's not one of these like simple kinds of websites. I can do it. I can do it all by myself now. And I can still get help if I need. So sometimes that big scary monster it's not so big once you start figuring out the steps to conquer. I'm going to read a little something. I'm going to pick it randomly. I've been liking doing this random stuff. I was doing random Rumi readings for a while, and all my Rumi books had to be taken back to the library. You can only renew them so many times, and after, I guess, a year or so, they get to where you this is from Walt Whitman, Earth, My Likeness, Nature Poetry of Walt Whitman. This is from Our Old Fuelage. It's just an excerpt from that. The camp of Georgia wagoners just after dark, the supper fires and the cooking and eating by whites and Negroes. 30 or 40 great wagons, the mules, cattle, horses, feeding from troughs, the shadows, gleams, up under the leaves of the old sycamore trees, the flames with the black smoke from the pitch pine curling and rising. That's all it says on that part. So what word stuck out? The word Negroes stuck out to me, right? I wasn't expecting that. I just read that. I had no idea that I was going to be taking the show in this direction. I guess that's what makes it exciting. I used to drive a cab, and sometimes I would get into these conversations with people, and sometimes, on more than one occasion, I don't know exactly how many. I drove a cab for 7 years, and there was a older black woman, at least 70 some years old. Let's say maybe she was even 80 something. And I don't know what brought it up exactly, but the term African Americans came up. And whether or not that was the right word or the right term for black people, or whatever we're supposed to call them. Have to have some kind of name for them, right? It's ridiculous. Or maybe it's not. But she said, guess what she wanted to be called? She said an American Negro. And I said, well, that wouldn't sound right coming from me, though, would it? She goes, well, it depends who you said it to. But in her mind, her opinion, her perspective, her preference was American Negro. She identified, that's how she was identifying herself, or identifying her. What is that? It's not herself exactly, is it? It's her. Label came up to mind. Labels, huh? It's so bizarre, really. But I thought that was kind of cool that she said that. So, but she wasn't the first one that said that. Um, there was another older black woman. She was in her 90s, I think, and she said something like that too. But she had some like Native American in her also. I think she said American Negro also. I think American Negro was. I think that exact term came up a couple times, and there were some variations on that. But they didn't want to be called African anything. They were. I'm not sure if proud is the right word, but at least there's some pride in being from America. And we're talking about people that are old enough to live through those. Like one of them, the one that was 90 something, her grandma was a slave. Yeah. Yeah. It was, did you say her mother, her grandma? So it would have been, I think it would have been her grandma and maybe her mom when she was young. That's, can you imagine? I mean, it's not really that long ago, but she still wanted to be referred to, if we're going to refer to her as something, American Negro. But I'm not going to use that term uh, in other circumstances. But why? I mean, it's not offensive, right? Or is it? Depends. Like she said, depends who you're talking to. Enough about that. We're all the same. We're all the same. We're all different, and we're all the same. So this book here, it takes like parts of a bunch of it takes parts of longer poems and I don't know, to the spring and brook. So, still sauntering on to the spring under the willows, musical as soft clinking glasses, pouring a sizable stream, thick as my neck, pure and clear, out from its vent where the bank arches over like a great brown shaggy eyebrow or mouth roof, gurgling, gurgling ceaselessly, meaning saying something, of course, if one could only translate it. Always gurgling there, the whole year through, never giving out, oceans of mint, blackberries in summer, choice of light and shade, just the place for my July sun baths and water baths too. But mainly the inimitable soft sound, gurgles of it, as I sit there hot afternoons. How they and all grow into me day after day, everything in keeping, the wild, just palpable perfume and the dapple of leaf shadows and all the natural, medicinal, elemental, moral influences of the spot. Some interesting stuff here. Earth, my likeness. Though you look so impassive, ample, and spheric there, I now suspect that is not all. I now suspect there is something fierce in you, eligible to burst forth. For an athlete is enamored of me, and I of him. But toward him there is something fierce and terrible in me, eligible to burst forth. I dare not tell it in words, not even in these songs. That's interesting, right? But toward him there is something fierce and terrible in me, eligible to burst forth. Walt Whitman. Now, this big scary monster idea of mine, I was thinking of these different big scary monsters that we encounter. And so much of life is that. Or we can see things that way. And like part of it was, okay, this podcast. Okay, so the podcast, it's called Fitness and Consciousness. Well, most of the shows are not about fitness, but in another way they are. If you're talking about like, maybe there's like mental fitness, there's, if we're stretching the word of fitness out, which is what I intended to do from the very beginning. But most of the shows are about like consciousness kinds of subjects and just different perspectives and the way to look at things. Like when Chris was looking at my website tonight, like on the front, like the homepage, it says from beginner to athlete. And that was actually something that my web builder put on there. And, like I said, she was taking classes from me for a long time. And then he mentioned that it's like a double meaning, which I don't think that I ever saw it like that before. But as soon as he said it, I got it. I'm like, oh, you're right. He said, yeah, because people can start as a beginner or they can start as an athlete, and I can help out and help anyone improve. But you can also start as a beginner and move into an athlete. So it kind of has like this double meaning to it. I forget what I was going with that. Oh, but anyways, that's what all the shows are about. It's about breaking down these words, breaking down these phrases, these ways of thinking that, when we say something to someone, how do they hear it? Is it how we meant it? I think a lot gets lost in translation. I think we can say something simple and people don't hear it. Like, there's that saying, like, we don't see people how they are, we see them how we are. So big, scary monsters. And sometimes maybe going out on your own, starting your own business, that can be a big, scary monster. I'm going to quit saying big, scary monster, probably. I don't know how many times I've said it. But that's what the show is. So we'll see how it goes. I'd been looking into having my own gym for a long time. I've always wanted my own gym. Going back, I started as a personal trainer in 1999. It's over 1,000 years ago. No, it's not 1,000 years ago, but It's the last millennium. So that's 1,000 years. It's math. But why didn't I do it back then? It was almost, I don't know if it would have been, you have to kind of like get your mind right. You have to, what I was trying to do for a while was, it's like, yeah, I have steady clients in place. So when I do move in to my own place, it's the right amount of money. It's the right amount of, clients coming in. It's the right space. It's everything needs to be functional. And I spent a fair amount of time, so I knew I had to change the way my mind works, because we can't, like, that phrase, you can't get there from here. So there's different ways of thinking. Like there's, most of the time that awesome singer is not the songwriter. Of course, there's people that write their own songs, but a lot of times that great singer is singing someone else's songs. Elvis. Was he writing all of his songs? Nope. What about the Grateful Dead? Yeah, Jerry Garcia wrote some songs. They've had so many songs, but most of them were written by Robert Hunter. He wasn't even in the band, or he was in the band as a songwriter. He wasn't playing with them. And when Robert Hunter would tour, at least from what I mean, he had nowhere close to the following of the Grateful Dead, even though he was playing those songs and he wrote them. Right, David Gilmour, who's the guitar player for Pink Floyd and lead singer and guitar player for Pink Floyd, not the songwriter. Of course, he wrote a lot. But most of the songs were not written by him, or least not like the lyrics and stuff. The guitar parts were. So when you're going into business, what are you good at? So I understood the training stuff. I've been a good trainer for a long time. I would even say I'm a great trainer. I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this stuff for a long time. I still study every day. That doesn't mean I'm ready to stop learning. But as far as like some business stuff went, I knew there was a gap in my thinking. So I would talk to some other people, like the friend of mine that built my website, for one. She's like this. I mean, I don't think it's crazy to call her a genius at what she does. And then I heard she didn't even go to college. It's like, what? And like another friend told me, and then I asked her, and she goes, no, I didn't go to college for this. It's like, she's like, you can't go to college for this. And she leads the team, and everybody that works for her has a master's degree. But she doesn't have one. She did it herself. She figured everything out on her own. Because when you go to college to learn the stuff that she does, by the time you graduate, everything you've learned is out of date. So she's like this high level. She starts talking about like what she does. I get lost. I have no idea what she's talking about. I'm barely hanging on. She's just on a different level of thinking. And so when I knew I was getting closer and closer to starting my own business, I started getting a lot of business books, a lot of books about money, a lot of books about some stuff that may not even seem like it would translate exactly, but even like books about like more like real estate books. Like there's those books series like Rich Dad Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki. he has a different way of thinking. And so even though I wasn't really getting into investing in real estate, I do plan on it at some point, but for now I rent an apartment. I like that. I don't have to, if something goes wrong, somebody else fixes it. And if I want to move out, I'll move out. It's not a big deal. That's what I like right now. And so I like not owning the place I live or others, but I'm going to be positioning myself to do that over time. But I wanted to learn from him different ways of thinking. And so like some like what, I'm not going to get into too deep to what he was talking about, but it's like he's telling, yeah, like this rich dad and his poor dad. So his rich dad was his friend's dad. And then his poor dad really wasn't poor. He was like a college professor, but he would get a raise or he would get a promotion, and then they would get a nicer car. They would get a bigger house. And his poor dad, his real dad, thought that their house was a asset. But his rich dad, his friend's dad, said, if it's your house is not an asset, it's a liability because it costs you money every month. Now that investment property that you maybe earn $500 a month from, $50 a month from, you make $5 a month profit from it, that's an asset because it's giving you money every month. That car, it's not an asset because it doesn't give you money. Of course, you can sell it and get some money, but it's not earning you money, so it's not an asset. So it's just kind of like some different ways of thinking. And so I'm reading these different books about like Apple, and I'm looking like, okay, I'm studying podcasting. Okay, well, so I'm looking at guides on like how to do that. And this is like my 113th episode, I think. But then I start like getting books about like communication, presentations. So I was like, the presentation secrets of Steve Jobs. Somebody else recommended to me a book called Start With Why. It ended up being about Apple. I didn't know it was about Apple, but Apple is a good company to study if you're trying to learn stuff. And so I knew I had like my specialty, the stuff that comes naturally to me, and I'm able to study and get better and better, and that's the training stuff. And then take this other stuff that's not my specialty and learn it. So it's the guitar player, singer, has trouble writing lyrics, but he's figuring it out. He's figuring it out and practicing and just changing the way the thinking works. And kind of the way the thinking goes is you can't just like read a book and then understand it. Okay, you can kind of do that, but you read the book and then you're thinking about it. You hear a paragraph and then you start thinking about it, and those new mental pathways create your new life pathways. Okay, so everything starts with the thought. I'm going to take a drink of coffee, and then I raise my arm up. I reach for the coffee. I pick up the coffee. When say you have a thermos of coffee, a tumbler, I think, whatever they're called. And so you have your coffee in there, and you can't see where the coffee is. So you start to tilt it back just a little bit, because if you do it real fast, you're gonna burn your mouth. So you do it just a little bit, and it takes kind of a relatively long time to get that first sip because you're figuring out how much to go. Well, then the next time you take a drink, you got it. You got it figured out. Am I making sense? Is that making sense? My dad got me this book. I know most people listen to the show, but the show is also on YouTube. It's the Fitness and Consciousness YouTube channel. And it's also on Patreon. If you want to support the show, you can do so on Podbean or Patreon. And if you want to you can do it for as low as $1 per month. My dad got me this book, and it was like a little kit. It's called The Path of the Feather. So he gave it to me. I'm not sure how long before he died. So he died in 2005. I'm not sure if he gave it to me maybe a year before he died. But I was going to tell a different story, but I just opened it up to this page. I'm going to read from this. So the feather is a symbol of spirit and being on the right path. You have come to the place in the center of your medicine wheel, the path of the feather as a way of being. Your feather is a symbol of your spiritual and shamanic journey. Being on the right path means that whatever you are doing is right action. That makes sense, right? It is about trusting that what you are doing is right for you and for the earth. The feather is a symbol that earth honors you, recognizes you, and gives you a gift from its body for what you do. The gift of the feather is the earth's way, in its most gentle form of honoring you. In 1999, a group of First Nations people marched 500 miles in the dead of winter from South Dakota to Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming to save the last herd of free-roaming buffalo. They walked each day in the cold, in the snow. Their elders walked with them. Children wrapped in blankets echoed the past marches across the plains for centuries. At Yellowstone, they made a circle and performed a Sundance buffalo ritual that had never been seen by non-indigenous people and had not been done for 100 years. A man dragged a buffalo skull around the circle. His commitment and the commitment of his people to what they believed was awesome. The pilgrimage and ordeal they underwent to manifest was extreme. Right action comes from commitment. Your life is a symbolic act no matter what you do. You do everything in spirit space. You can't take anything with you when you die. We have nothing except faith in ourselves and the commitment to manifest our own life. To do right action, let something flow through you from the Great Spirit with commitment. Make a difference by doing something that is not solely for you. Do something that is bigger than you. Do it generously. The contemporary shaman does ritual and right action at the same time. He or she is inside the opening where a moment is born within her heart. And the shaman enters that moment and helps create it on earth. The shaman acts within the dream that gives birth to the moment. Then they open their eyes and see the earth. This is shamanic visioning. This is seeing her vision on earth. They then must do action to manifest it. The first action is making sacred space. The second action is finding out what you are to do on the vision quest. The third action is manifestation through prayer and visioning. The fourth action is doing right action. It goes on. So my dad got me this book, and it came with a medicine wheel kit. And it had these on the pieces for the medicine wheel. It had the symbols of the animals on it. And I didn't open it for a long time. It sat on my bookshelf. And I was with a friend, and I found these shaman stones at this store called All My Relations, which I later found out was indigenous American term for everything is all of our relations. Like everything in the earth is like a part of us. We're part of it. This was many years ago, and so I got these shaman stones, and they blew my mind, and you could feel the energy between the stones. And my and so sometimes I go through these different phases where I'd carry stones around with me, and from the time I was a pretty little kid, I was into like tiger's eye, and I get these different like crystals, like quartz crystals and stuff, and these different kinds of stones, and thought they were cool. And I'd read about the esoteric properties and magical healing properties and stuff, but I never really had any experience proving any of that. I just pretty much thought they were cool, these rocks. And I had some friends, probably, maybe junior high, but high school. I had friends, and we collected different stones, and we would trade and give them to each other. And hippie kids doing hippie kid stuff, and never had any kind of experience that I thought really gave them credibility, something powerful. It's just something cool. Look at these stones. And so I was at this store, all my relations. I took this friend of mine to the dentist, and I was like, oh, well, while you're in the dentist, there's a shop I've been meaning to go into. She's like, okay, cool. I was like, yeah, just call me when you're done, and I'll be right back. And so I go into the store. It's on the west side of Indianapolis. And I go in, and as soon as I go in, I'm like, I smell the sage. And like, where I was like transported into, it was like I was in a different kind of dimension. I smelled sage a million times. Oh, like burning sage. But it was like when I walked in, it was like a door to a different realm. And so then the lady that's walking around with the sage, she asked me if I wanted smudge. And I was like, sure. So she goes around, she's smudging me and lifting up my arms, and she's going around me, and like, cool. And so I start walking around, and they have all kinds of like big quartz, like the purple, I can't remember what the purple's called, but all kinds of different stones and cool little things and books. And I'm just like looking around, and they have incense, and they have just a bunch of cool stuff like that. And I'm looking and looking, and I'm not really seeing anything that I'm going to buy. And I was like, I felt pretty like weird in there. This is like perfectly sober. I don't smoke. I don't drink. I don't do any kind of, it was just walking through these doors. It was like walking through a different kind of door, And then I was like starting to like look at my phone. I'm like, it seems like my friend should be calling me. She should be about done at the dentist. And it's like, I wonder if my phone even works in this realm. It's like, maybe I should just go back and wait for her at the dentist. And so I was walking, I get up to the front by the counter, and I see this little basket of stones, and it says like Moki Shaman stones. And it's like the properties of them were like access to ancient and future knowledge, like protection, and I found them really fascinating. And so I picked one up. I was gonna buy one, and I'm still in this like different kind of state of consciousness here. And the lady said, she goes, "Oh, are you getting a male or a female? And I was like, I don't know. What should I get? And she said, get a female. And I said, well, what's this one? She said, that's a female. Like, okay, cool. Picked the right one. So I buy it, and I'm just like fascinated by this thing. It looks almost like a flying saucer kind of shape. And then I take it and I go to pick my friend up. And I get out to the dentist, and I'm Googling these Moki shaman stones. And I'm just reading about all this fascinating accounts of what they do, what they are. And I see it says they pair up, and then you can feel the energy between the two of them. Like they work better in pairs, a male-female pair. So when my friend comes out, I show it to her and start to tell her a little bit. I was like, I want to go back and get a male now. Do you mind getting her? And she goes, no, cool. And she was into stones also, and she wanted to get one. And so we're back at the store, and she had more or less the same kind of thing happen with me as me. Like she was picking one out. The lady said, are you getting a male or a female? And she was, I don't know, what's this? And or what should I get? She said, get a male. And so what's this? It's a male. And so the males the males are shaped more like the flying saucer. The females are more round, spherical. And so I was like, okay. So she had like the same thing happen, and we didn't have that conversation before. The male female thing, or well, how I got mine, didn't have that conversation. And so she gets one, and I get my pair, and you can feel the energy between them. There's like a magnetic pulsing. They don't push away, and they don't pull towards. It's like this pulsing sort of, and they have like some iron in them, so it's not like something that's just in your mind. I mean, this is science also. This is like, anybody can feel it. And once you get it going, it's crazy. So I get that by the time, so I drop her off at her place. By the time I even get home, she's sending me a message. She wants to go back the next day and get a female. And so we do that. So, well, I pick up this blind friend of mine. And so I'm driving the cab. Okay. I met him driving the cab. And, he's like, I guess he's like a straight kind of Christian guy, not into magic rocks and stuff. And so I say, what do you think about these? I didn't tell him anything about them at all. So what do you think about these? And he just held his hand out. He can't see anything at all. And he told him, and he's like, oh, wow. Oh, wow. He goes, oh, these are for healing. And he's telling me all about, if you Google them, that's what he said. And he'd never heard them before. I didn't tell him anything except, what do you think about these? And so then I showed him, oh, you can, like hold them. Then I started like telling him a little bit. After he told me about him, I was like, yeah. And then, hold them apart a little bit, and you can feel the pulsing energy. And he hands them back to me, and they are very warm. I mean, almost hot. And I was like, oh, wow, these are really hot. And he goes, oh, yeah, I really got them going. Like, okay, that's cool. This other friend I was picking up, she had diabetes, and when she woke up in the morning, her blood sugar would be about 200. And I showed them to her, and it was like the same thing. What do you think about these? Didn't say anything else. And she's playing with them. She's like, what is this? Is this some kind of healing thing? I didn't tell her anything about them, but she knew. And basically, if you Google them and you look up what they say, that's what she said. I'm like, okay, that's cool. So I let her borrow the pair of them. So normally when she wakes up, her blood sugar is 200. I put the exact numbers that she told me on Facebook. This was years ago. But so the night or the morning after she borrowed them, she gets up, she checks her blood sugar. It was like 137. And I was like, oh, were you expecting it to be low? And she goes, no, I thought it would be high because I was drinking juice and eating candy the night before. Like, okay, wow. She goes, yeah, it was crazy. And she just slept with him by her. The next day, it was like 120 something, same thing. The next day, it was down to like 117. She gives them back to me, and it goes back up to 200. And so crazy. So I show them to my mom. I got my mom a pair, and she's holding them. And she's like, oh, I can feel the energy going up my arm. And basically, if you Google what it says, that's what she said. Just amazing. So I was like looking for and I let somebody else hold them, and she's like, oh, I feel like I just took a hit off a joint or something. And so she wanted a pair. And like these things are just like blowing my mind. So before I've been into stones and stuff since I was a kid. Never had anything like this happen with any kind of crystals or other sorts of stones. And I wanted a bag to carry them around. I gave, my girlfriend at that time, she has the first pair. I hope she still has them. The first pair that I got. And I have one pair, a big pair. But at that time, I was looking for a medicine bag to carry them around in. And so I went back to that store and couldn't find them. I just wanted like a simple, plain, like off-white canvas kind of medicine bag. Seemed like it would be a very simple thing to find. I went to a few places, couldn't find one. And then I'm at home and I look over at my bookshelf and I see this book that's still in the kit with the medicine wheel. And it hadn't been opened. And I'd already had it for years, 10 years. And I went over and I grabbed it, this thing that hadn't been opened, even though I've had it for so long. And I looked at the back of it and it said it had a medicine bag in it. And so I opened it up and that was the exact medicine bag I'd been looking for. And so I carried them around in that, and I started carrying some other stones. And then it got to be like, oh, I just have like this bag of stones. It is too much stones to carry around. And I try to like not carry around so many. But it's pretty amazing that and I don't call myself a shaman or anything. I've studied a lot of that stuff. I think the word shaman maybe gets a little thrown around too much. So I just opened it up. I just opened it up to this page. It says, what is a shaman? One of Michael's teachers, Rolling Thunder, told him this story. Rolling Thunder was up in the mountains watching a road being built. The road was next to a sacred tree that was the grandfather tree. The plant spoke to him. He knew that the tree was not to be touched. There was a bulldozer there that was about to push down the tree. In his mind, he said a prayer, and the bulldozer stopped. The bulldozer did not work the next day or all the next week. He kept praying. The road was delayed. The ancient tree was saved. Rolling Thunder said, this work is very powerful. It can change the weather. It can save a forest. It can stop a bulldozer. That is the power of a shaman. The shaman is the man or woman who sees into the sacred world. The shaman goes inward and brings his or her visions to the ancient spirits and spirit animals outward to the world as ceremony and ritual. By this process, most similar to prayer, imagery, and art, the shaman heals himself, others, and the earth. By having visions of healing and by doing sacred rituals, the shaman makes the visions come true. The shaman goes into the world of the spirits and can act there. The shaman can affect the spirits, talk to them, and have them as helpers, or if they are a cause of illness, retrieve the soul. That is how the shaman heals. There was another weird thing that happened with those shaman stones that I have. And his friend of mine, he went to the hospital. He thought he had kidney stones. There was a lot of pain. And they just thought it would pass. He's calling the doctor. And, it's like, oh, describe me. Oh, it's going to pass. And he goes to the hospital. Turns out he has appendix burst. He'd been walking around with a busted appendix for a while. A few days. Could have died. Like septic, lots of pain. And they, I remember seeing his picture that he posted on Facebook of him in the hospital looking rough. And so I sent him a message like, I'm going to bring you my shaman stones tomorrow. I'm like, okay. And so that night, I was imagining my shaman stones were on my dresser, and I was like trying to send them to him in my mind so he could use them that night while they were still with me. And I kept seeing them like go from my dresser to his belly, and then they'd be back on my dresser really fast. And I was trying to, in my mind, keep them there, but they kept like popping back, him popping back. And then the next morning I went there to drop him off. So he was on Dilaudid, like heavy duty painkillers. And when I got to him that morning, I asked him how he was doing, and he said that last night he felt like he turned the corner. It was the words that he used, and he felt a lot better, and he wasn't even on painkiller that day. But I left him the shaman stones. He was still getting like IVs and stuff. But did the shaman stones do anything? That crazy? Well, when the diabetic was sleeping next to him, her blood sugar went from 200 to 137 to 120 something to 117. And then when she gave him back, they went boom, 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 up back to 200. That was real. The blind guy knew they were for healing, and I didn't tell him anything about them, except, what do you think about these? Another lady that could see, but I didn't tell her anything about them, knew they were for healing. Whatever. Well, let's look at from the Prophet Kahlil Gibran. I just opened up randomly and then turned the page back because I didn't open it to the beginning. Then a priestess said, "Speak to us of prayer." And he answered, saying, "You pray in your distress and in your need. Would that you might pray also in the fullness of your joy and in your days of abundance. For what is prayer but the expansion of yourself into the living ether? And if it is for your comfort to pour your darkness into space, it is also for your delight to pour forth the dawning of your heart. And if you cannot but weep when your soul summons you to prayer, she should spur you again and yet again, though weeping, until you shall come laughing. When you pray, you rise to meet in the air those who are praying at that very hour, and whom save in prayer you may not meet. Therefore let your visit to the temple invisible be for naught but ecstasy and sweet communion. For if you should enter the temple for no other purpose than asking, you shall not receive. And if you should enter into it to humble yourself, you shall not be lifted. Or even if you should enter into it to beg for the good of others, you shall not be heard. It is enough that you enter the temple invisible. I cannot teach you how to pray in words. God listens not to your words, save when he himself utters them through your lips. And I cannot teach you the prayer of the seas and the forests and the mountains. But you who are born of the mountains and the forests and the seas can find their prayer in your heart. And if you but listen in the stillness of the night, you shall hear them saying in silence, O God, who art our winged self, it is thy will in us that willeth. It is thy desire in us that desireth. It is thy urge in us that would turn our nights, which are thine, into days, which are thine also. We cannot ask thee for aught, for thou knowest our needs before they are born in us. Thou art our need, and in giving us more of thyself, thou givest us all. So another like big scary monster might be coming on this podcast, doing this show, and I'm putting myself out there for like thousands of people to listen to. And then over the amount of time, over the 112 episodes, so many thousands of people have heard this show. It's I don't even know what the word is for it. But like today I came to this show with no notes. And hopefully you're not like, well, obviously. So why would I do that? I mean, I had in my mind, the different big scary monsters to explore. There's also a part of me that just kind of has a trust. I just trust that once I get going, if I just show up and I hit record and here I am, that the magic will happen. And magic is maybe something quite mundane, but maybe the magic is more magical. And maybe I'm reading just what you needed to hear. And maybe I put things in some kind of wording of my own that helps you in some way. And I hope that's what happens. I hope this show stimulates thought and action. And I hope I have, some positive influence on the people that listen. Or be entertained for a little while, or something to think about. I know there's a lot of shows. I know people can spend their time on other things. And I'm gonna I have a guest coming up. It's been a while. I got my computer fixed. Oh, it's been fixed for the last few episodes. I do have right now. It's just one guest that I'm talking to. I haven't been asking people for a while. Well, there might be a couple. There's one. Well, I have a few things in the works, but if you have any feedback, you can send me a message. The easiest email is fitnessandconsciousness@gmail.com. If you would like for me to talk about a subject, maybe it has to do with training, physical training, martial arts, maybe it has to, whatever it has to do with. If you want to hear me do a show about it, just send me a message. I'll see what I can do. Most the feedback of the show is really positive. I'm really glad people listen and like it. I think I will just think I'll read one more thing here. Perfections. Only themselves understand themselves, and the like of themselves, as souls only understand souls. So Walt Whitman, 1860. Only themselves understand themselves, and the like of themselves, as souls only understand souls. What do you think about that? I think about that a lot, like understanding people, and like towards the beginning of the show, I was talking about that woman who I may be interested in. The one who had a lot in common with, and maybe she gave some hints that she was interested, maybe, but and then maybe I gave some maybes. And that stuff that we had in common, is that good enough? Is that even important? Yes, I think. Be able to like understand each other, and I think we had like some similar, like not the some very similar spiritual outlooks, morality stuff. I don't want to say too much. There was this other, so I'll only go out with one woman at a time, even if it's at the very beginning. And there was someone else, sort of like dating app that I talk about sometimes. And from what it seems like so far, she doesn't have those things in common. She seems to be like a sweet person and attractive, but maybe not on the same page at all spiritually. And I think I'll leave it at that. Just a little something to think about. So which one would make more sense? And it's interesting, like when the one that you think you don't have as much in common with seems to be more interested in you than the one that you think you do have a lot in common with. But yeah, still both at the very beginning, and we'll see what happens. Thanks for tuning in, and go after those big scary monsters, but have a strategy.